It starts with just one video, then another, then suddenly millions. TikTok trends spread faster than anyone can control and take on a life of their own that no one could have possibly predicted. Some of these trends are harmless, some are creepy, and some are incredibly dangerous, leaving people seriously injured or worse. Tonight we're taking a look at some disturbing TikTok trends that went way too far. And as we go further down the list, the trends only get darker and more disturbing. Before we get into the topics, I just wanted to say thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you enjoy, a like and subscribe would mean the world, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Elevator game. The elevator game is an urban legend that originated in Korea but made its way over to the United States. The story goes that if you follow the specific instructions of the game, you will be able to enter another dimension where you are completely alone. But there is a twist in that if you aren't careful, you could be stuck there forever. And even if you do make it back, there's a chance that you may not be alone. To play the game, you need a building with at least 10 floors and an elevator that goes to all 10. You must enter the elevator alone. If someone else enters, then the game is over and you will need to try again at a later date. You first must press a series of buttons, and once you reach the 5th floor, approximately 7 button presses later, then a woman may enter the elevator. At this point, you need to completely ignore her and press the button to go to the 1st floor. If the elevator goes to the 1st floor at this point, then the game has failed. If instead it rises to the 10th floor, then you have successfully been transported to another world. So this is all talk, right? Pretty much. The likelihood of this being real is next to none, but that didn't stop people on TikTok from giving it a go. Of course, there's no real footage of anyone actually successfully playing the game. The story goes that if you do successfully make it over to the other world, then all electronics will stop working. So even if you were to successfully play the game, you would have no way to get any footage of it. It is essentially impossible to come back with any sort of proof. But some creators took it a step further than actually trying to play the challenge and made fake videos in an attempt to fool their viewers. To the average person, you'll probably be able to guess that it isn't real, but to kids or teenagers or just anyone who isn't tech savvy, they could actually fall for it. And if they fall for it, then they may want to give it a go themselves. And while on the surface it may not seem that dangerous, it certainly can be. Over the years, some people have claimed that they've spent hours on end in an elevator trying to get the game to work. Not only could this cause the elevator itself to break down if you're constantly pressing buttons for hours and forcing movement, but you could also be without food or water for a bit and even start to get claustrophobic inside of the tiny metal box. The people staying in the elevator for this long was a very small amount of them, but even the more mainstream attempts led to panic attacks or paranoia. This wasn't supernatural, but it was still a result of partaking in the trend. And the body has a funny way of explaining things, so if something were to happen while you were inside the elevator, your brain could put it down to being supernatural rather than a simple mechanical error. There are a few users who have recalled just how awful they felt during the game purely out of fear, so this really highlights how fun games can really turn dangerous. But it's more than just dangers to the actual users though, because there is one real-life case that TikTok users and true crime sleuths are obsessed with. The case of Elisa Lam. 21-year-old Elisa Lam went missing on the 26th of January 2013 at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. 2 weeks later, on the 19th of February, there was still no sign of her. But things took a much darker turn when, on that day, her body was discovered in the water tank on the hotel rooftop, which no one should have been able to get to. CCTV footage of Elisa in her final moments showed her acting very strangely in the hotel's elevator. This led to some conspiracies that Elisa had actually been playing the elevator game at the time of her death, which is very obviously a dangerous assumption to spread. Over the years since this case took place, people have actually visited the Cecil Hotel to play the game, using the exact same elevator that Elisa had set foot in all of those years ago. Not only is that causing disruption to the guests of the hotel, but it's also not great for business, so there is a direct impact to basically everyone. simply because users are trying to partake in a seemingly harmless trend. And the spreading of this misinformation is also a massive talking point about the case as a whole. To this day, people still discuss whether she was playing the elevator game in that fateful evening, and even though there is no evidence to back it up apart from a short bit of CCTV footage that shows next to nothing, people still buy it. This highlights a much bigger problem with the world and TikTok because Elisa was actually prone to episodes due to her being bipolar. People on the internet would rather assume that someone died through supernatural means rather than address the genuine issue of mental health. Some people are still extremely uneducated on the matter, and cases like this paint a very clear picture of it. But if you think this trend went too far, the next one resulted in people making discoveries related to real-life murder cases. And that trend is Randonautica. In the summer of 2020, TikTok users were all over a brand new app called Randonautica. It essentially sends you on adventures around your marked location by giving you random coordinates that are supposedly related to the intention that you set. The app intends to test the theory that human consciousness can influence the distribution of random numbers through the connection between the human mind and technology. In simpler terms, it was to figure out if your brain could send specific directions to your phone as to what you were thinking of. While it was fun for a bit and people were running into some strange coincidences, like finding something red after they thought of that colour, some users began to make horrific discoveries. A few months after the app went viral, a group of teens in Seattle were led to a seemingly random beach for the app. Once there, they found a black suitcase placed in a very strange location. As they got closer, it began to smell really bad. One of the teens used a nearby stick to poke the case open, and as soon as it was open, the stench was overwhelming. It was at this point that they realised that they may have just found something horrible. They were so freaked out that they called the police, and once the authorities arrived at the scene, they confirmed that inside the case was real human remains wrapped in trash bags. The video was posted to TikTok and it garnered over 25 million views before it was deleted by the uploader. But this isn't the only time that Randonautica has led people to terrible things. The same month that the suitcase was found, another user had thought up the intention of death. The user, who went by Makina Ray on TikTok, described her experience, saying that when she approached the location that the app had sent her to, she saw someone on the side of the road who had been wounded by a gunshot. The friend who was with her at the time wrapped his jacket around the victim's wounds, and the police quickly made their way to the scene. Of course, because this is social media, you may want to assume this is fake, but there is actually an official police tweet to back this up, so it essentially confirms that this did actually happen. Speaking out after the incident, Ray said that she had used Randonautica in the past, but that her intentions hadn't worked, so she thought that choosing death would also result in nothing. Sadly, she was wrong, and although the comments were extremely mean to her for doing so, she seems to have taken it on the chin and admitted that that is just something that comes with a little bit of popularity on the internet. After the increase in disturbing events while people were using the app, people on TikTok began to theorise that this was all intentional. The theory went that the app somehow knew about all of these disturbing events and was purposely leading people to them. This didn't look good on the creator, a man named Joshua Lengfelder, and he quickly spoke out, shutting down the harmful rumour and saying that he would have never predicted that his app could have led someone to a dead body. A professor of psychology also offered up a slight explanation, saying that if you set out to find coincidences, then you are more likely to find them, and that is really what the app is entirely built on. Momo challenge. This image may still terrify you, as it did many parents and children back when it went viral in 2019. People were sharing the picture of this creepy creature all over TikTok, trying to freak out their friends into thinking that something bad was going to happen. This was all in an attempt to go viral, and it's safe to say that the attempts worked. Rumours began spreading that the creature known as Momo was getting in touch with kids using apps like WhatsApp. She would allegedly send disturbing messages to them, daring them to do terrifying things like harm others, or even to take their own lives. She would say that if you didn't obey, then you would be punished by Momo herself. Some people even stated that she would gather personal information about you, such as your address or where you went to school, in an attempt to have some sort of leverage over you. This would leave kids to think that they had no choice but to do what she said. Although there was basically no evidence anyone called Momo was actually doing this, fear spread faster faster than fact, and a lot of people started to believe that this was genuinely happening. News outlets, parents, schools, and even the police were alerting people to the fact that Momo existed, and this certainly didn't help matters. There are unconfirmed reports that some children in the US and UK were harming themselves as a result of the Momo trend, with some people claiming that kids had even taken their own lives. There was no direct evidence to back this up, but this just goes to show how fast the fear was spreading. People were worrying that their kids could harm themselves, all thanks to TikTok rumors. And it wasn't just parents that were scared, because kids were absolutely terrified. They were seeing all over the news and all over social media that Momo was going after kids, so they wouldn't sleep a wink at the thought that this creature could come through their window at night. Other kids may not have been directly terrified, but used the fear to prank other children, similar to how the trend started in the first place. It didn't take long for the trend to spread to other social media platforms as content featuring Momo started to hit YouTube. Seemingly innocent videos were being pushed to YouTube Kids, and it was only when everyone had their guards down that a picture of Momo would flash on the screen, sending the viewer into utter panic. YouTube demonetized all videos aimed at kids that featured the creature, and although it may have been eradicated on one platform, that didn't help the case on TikTok. But by this point, it was clear that it was nothing but a hoax. Of course, parents now had the difficult job of calming their kids down after this whole debacle, but there was at least no need to worry about genuine harm coming to them. The trend had become so mainstream though that it was even discussed by the British government. One minister said that there was no confirmed evidence of anything Momo related causing harm to any UK children, but that they would certainly do more to tackle the dangers of the online world. So while the Momo challenge may have never been a genuine threat, it certainly took on a life of its own, because the panic spread faster than anyone could have controlled. This is yet another example of how TikTok trends can go too far, with the platform simply fueling the uncontrollable fire. TikTok's true crime community. True crime has and will always fascinate people. As humans, we're curious about how things happen and we want to get to the bottom of it. So it should have been no surprise that the true crime community on TikTok quickly became massive. Things started as normally as they could have for this side of the platform. People would discuss cold cases and try their hardest to raise awareness for missing person cases and other crime cases that may have fallen under the radar. But although this was how it rose to popularity, it quickly started to attract the wrong type of people. Those who like to make up conspiracy theories and sensationalize the deaths of people. True crime content on TikTok was extremely popular, so it's really no surprise how quickly it hit the For You page and how much it took off. And with that, of course, you're going to attract the people who you originally want to stay far away. With how accessible content on TikTok is, and how many people have the skills to break down complex cases in a small amount of time, the likes and comments that these videos were getting were making the algorithm reward their efforts. The genre quickly became easier to get into than ever, and people took their chance. Although there are still many creators who genuinely want to get the word out there, some people are simply out there to entertain. Instead of respectfully covering cases anymore and doing their hardest to keep the legacy of a real person alive, some people opt to use overly dramatic storytelling and even AI to recreate a crime case. I made a video on the rise of AI true crime content on TikTok, and it's crazy to think that it's still going on. They're essentially using it to revive the dead, and it's not getting any better. And even if you aren't making this content, some people can fall into the trap of thinking that they're the person who can solve a mystery. Armchair detectives come together from all corners of the world, and although in some cases they can do good, in others they cause more harm, jumping to conclusions and spreading dangerous misinformation. A lot of these sleuths also have no regard for any of the real people actually involved in the cases. Take the murders of 4 students in Idaho for example. In 2022, these 4 students were found stabbed to death in their off-campus home after 2 of their surviving roommates had alerted the police to a strange person in the house. During the 6-week police investigation, TikTok ran wild with unfounded unfounded rumours, and it proves how dangerous this side of the platform can be. One of the survivors is referred to by the police as DM, and her story goes that she heard commotion throughout the night, and at 4 AM, when she opened her door for the third time that night, she saw a dark figure walking towards her. Rather than interacting with her, the figure simply walked out of the sliding door to the home. It was at this point that DM went back into her room and locked the door. This was enough for people, as once her testimony went public, videos hit TikTok almost immediately, accusing the surviving roommate of having something to do with the killings of her friends. Videos using hashtags that contained her full legal name had been viewed over 36 million times, and people were questioning why she did what she did. Some people jumped to her defense, but the damage had already been done. And people stuck to their false accusations even after the police named a likely suspect. It got so extreme that the family of one of the victims had to actually come out and defend the roommate, saying that attention should be focused on the actual suspect. After this, some users who had taken part in spreading the baseless rumours did come out and apologise, but others simply left their video on the platform, never said another word about it, and let them keep gaining views. Hundreds of these were still available to view in the months that followed, and even more were appearing by the day, accusing other close friends and partners of having something to do with the horrific crime. A professor of the university was even accused, and when she took her accuser to court, the creator said that she did not care about the harm that happened to the professor because it had nothing to do with her. A complete lack of accountability. But it's not only amateur investigations, because some people take it a step further and make simp edits of real serial killers. Some people even justify the actions of these people, which is incredibly concerning. It doesn't take long to find fan edits of Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, with people professing their love over the dangerous men. And if someone is not directly partaking in these communities, then they could still be feeding into the most dangerous one of them all: the exaggeration of real cases for views. It's not uncommon for some of these creators to completely make up stories in an attempt to promote their content. If they don't have a case for that week, then simply pop it into ChatGPT and recall a completely false story. If the incident is real, then it could contain scarier details than what actually happened. It's also a case of plagiarism in a lot of videos, because a lot of the time these creators simply handpick information from news sources or even independent journalists. They make no attempt to actually make it their own and simply read off newspapers. But for all the damage that TikTok's true crime obsession has had, there is actually one trend that has saved someone's life: hand signals. In 2021, a 16-year-old girl was found and rescued after the authorities were alerted that she had used a hand gesture that was from TikTok. The gesture was used to signal for help, and she did so to a passing vehicle. The driver stayed behind the kidnapper's vehicle and called 911, telling them what she had seen. The police intercepted it and the girl was rescued, all before anything else could happen. She told authorities that she had gotten with her kidnapper and then proceeded to travel through North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio, the final destination being where the kidnapper had relatives. When the relatives realized that the girl he had brought to them was not only under the age of 18 but also reported missing, he fled. He was not dealing with that, and they became concerned as he began to travel southbound, with the girl still in his car. This is when she began to signal for help, and thankfully, it worked. The kidnapper was a 61-year-old man who was arrested on scene and charged with first-degree unlawful imprisonment. A search of his phone found that he had also been in possession of CSAM content, so that charge was also added to the list. It makes you wonder what would have happened if this girl hadn't have seen this on TikTok. The signal had been introduced the year before by a Canadian organisation for domestic abuse survivors to signal that they needed help, but it was quickly adopted as a universal way to signal that you were in danger. The girl had seen the signal uploaded on a video by a former police officer, who suggested that people who were kidnapped should use it in order to get help. And thankfully, it came in handy when she needed it the most. This isn't the only time that TikTok has come to the rescue for people in need, because for years, safety tips have been shared all over the platform. People will tell you how to escape if you're being held by someone stronger than you, or even how to break out of ropes should your hands be tied. In other cases, users have uploaded videos of themselves acting like they're on a phone call with you, so that if you feel in an unsafe situation, like with an Uber driver, you can play it and they'll know that someone has your location. And the concern on this last one isn't out of nowhere, because Uber's 2019 safety report found over 3,000 cases of sexual assault, with 9 riders having been murdered while using the app. So at a time when there was a serious risk of something bad happening if you were to get in the wrong car, this was a welcomed move and millions of videos began to pop up every single day. But while some trends may get people out of unwanted situations, others can put users in them. And for some partaking in this next trend, disaster followed. Exploring abandoned buildings. Urban exploration has been around for many years, but when it hit TikTok, it was spread to a whole new audience and blew up beyond anyone's expectations. There was something about abandoned places that drew people to them. They were attractive. Whatever was left was like the pieces of a world that existed before. I love watching videos of people exploring abandoned places for this exact reason, so you can see why people would want to visit them themselves. But as is the way with TikTok, something that started off fun quickly turned sinister. People realised that if they were to visit more obscure places, in a lot of cases more dangerous places, then they would get more views than anyone had ever gotten before. They could make sure that their video was the one to go viral. In 2022, the Fort Worth Fire Department rescued a man who was stuck inside of an abandoned silo. He was several stories up inside of the silo and he had to be taken to the local hospital because he was in serious condition. It was never revealed what he was actually doing inside of the silo, but at the time, there had been an increase in the amount of people who were visiting, you guessed it, abandoned silos. Even the popular urban explorers aren't immune to troubles either, because Rami Awad, a popular TikTok urban explorer, has spoken out about the dangers of partaking in the trend. He does stand by that he enjoys what he does, but urges people to be safe. And he's not afraid to speak about his negative experiences. He recalls that when he was exploring an abandoned church, he had half of his body fall through the floor. He says that if he hadn't caught himself with his arms, then he would have fallen all the way to the basement, which was some drop. And with nowhere nearby to help, it's really terrifying to think what could have happened. Although he is much safer when he explores now, he also explains a risk of inhaling things such as black mold and asbestos, among many other dangerous things. A cultural geographer at Southampton University also explained how urban exploration is getting more dangerous for a younger and more impressionable audience. He said, "A lot of these kids are putting themselves at greater risk to gain credibility on social media channels. There have been an increased number of deaths in the urban exploration community worldwide in the past few years, and that's gone hand in hand with the increased desire to publish these exploits on social media. But by far, the most disturbing trend that went way too far is sungazing. The sungazing trend gained significant attention when it came around in 2023, and the idea was that staring into the sun could give you health benefits. Clearly, this isn't true, but not only is it false, but it's also incredibly dangerous. People were saying that by staring directly into the sun at dusk and dawn every day, they were able to ditch their glasses and have almost perfect vision. The claim was that sun rays contribute to the increase in eye health, and despite there being absolutely no evidence to back this up, these so-called sun gazers were quick to jump on the trend, with the hashtag having over 76 million views in its first month. One optician came forward and tried to shut down the trend to prevent any more harm from being done. She confirmed that there was no scientific evidence to back up that sungazing was safe, never mind that it worked, and that all that is proven is that it can cause damage not only to your eyes but to your skin too. She said that the 3 types of radiation that come from the sun can cause eye conditions, skin burns, and even some forms of cancer. So sungazing isn't some way to unlock your hidden physical potential, but rather a way to physically damage your body for life. But despite the many medical warnings that were coming from professionals, some TikTok users kept promoting it, saying that these people were just trying to hide the true secrets of sungazing. It didn't matter that it was based on zero evidence because they were eating it up. TikTok kept pushing it as well because the algorithm doesn't rely on accuracy, it relies on engagement. And Sungazing was getting a lot of it. This then turns the platform into a bit of an echo chamber because influencers will convince their audience that what they are saying is right, and that doctors are simply trying to gatekeep the truth. Some creators took it a step further and said that doctors were a part of some bigger, much more evil agenda, even though there was scientific evidence that staring directly into the sun is an awful idea. And even Keke Palma was pulled into the trend. The star attempted to stare into the sun after becoming extremely sick of having to wear multiple pairs of glasses. Speaking about her experience, she said, "I done sunburned my retina playing around trying to be Gandhi and for all my spiritual heads out there that's always looking for a different meditation vibe, don't ever do the sun gazing, honey." So in the end, sun gazing wasn't some sort of hidden secret to unlocking your hidden potential, but rather a fast track to permanent eye damage. Thank you so much for making it to the end of that video. Like, subscribe, share the video, do all of that good stuff. And thank you so much guys for getting me to 10k, I really appreciate it. I'm trying to get 20k by the end of the year, so let's hope that I can do that. Let me know in the comments if you tried any of these TikTok trends, what one you think is most disturbing, and if I missed any. If there are enough and you guys like this, then maybe I'll make a follow-up. I've also launched the Jessicur subreddit if anyone wants to suggest any videos that you want me to cover. You can join it by going to reddit.com/r/Jessicur, and I really appreciate it if you would do that. And of course, thank you to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members: Brooke, Entrepreneur, Maury Gann, K4 Silver, Alex Rod, Based Finger, Carmilla, and Tango Slime. I appreciate you all for your continued support and you watching as well. If you want to get early access to my videos, you can for as little as £5 a month. You can check out my Patreon link in the description or join as a YouTube member. But of course, just watching the videos is enough, and that's just a bit of extra support if you're so inclined. I'll be back next Friday for another video. I hope you have a brilliant week, brilliant weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.